live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to jump in, talk a little Big Ten today, as we've got a pretty talented list of defensive guys. It's crazy that these back-to-back shows, SEC, Big Ten, that we've realized that there is an insanely talented grouping of these defensive guys that the list could have gone 10 deep for how good these prospects are.
You know what it makes? You know what I'm going to say.
What?
I don't want to hear about these other Rudy Poo conferences getting into the playoff if you have a 9-3 team in one of these situations that is on the outside looking in. I don't want to hear it, Joe. Like, think about this. We're potentially in the last two shows tonight talking about the Big Ten, and last night talking, or a couple of days ago talking about the SEC. We're legitimately talking about the 10 best college football defenders in the country, not
right
like just in their conference. Those groups, this group of 10 is the best in the country. So then a team goes 9-3, whether it be the Big Ten or the SEC, like at Illinois or Ole Miss, and we're like, oh, well, they're 9-3 and these other ones deserve to get in there. I mean, like the talent alone should speak for itself. That's just my humble opinion. I know I continue to stay on that soapbox, but I mean, like, dude, we're going to talk about 6 guys tonight that are potentially going to be some great NFL draft picks, some great NFL players that just so happen to have to be in college for another year.
Well, more importantly, I think all the guys that we're talking about today and that we talked about on the last show, they're all going to be incredibly dominant players at their respective positions. And I understand what you're saying. I generally reject your premise that just because that we're discussing the best players at their positions in the Big Ten and the SEC, and the rest of the conferences are so thin that we're avoiding them. Like, we're not going to do a Big 12. I'll be completely transparent. We're not going to do a Big 12 or an ACC list for defenders. We tried to do an ACC list for receivers and running backs, tight ends. That list was so shit that it was frankly a waste of time, because it was, okay, who else can fill the holes besides outside of Clemson?
That's the point. Like, that's
okay.
or Colorado. It's
well, which Colorado doesn't even really. They lost all their receivers. Their defense is good. Like, Jaheim Otis would make the list, but outside of that, it's not great.
A bench player at Alabama would be number 1 in the Big 12.
Well, quite literally, yeah, with Jaheim Otis.
Yeah, like literally, quite literally. So again, I don't want to hear it come fall. I do not want to hear it anymore, but that's not what we're here for. So here tonight, the top 5 Big Ten defenders. We'll get into that 1 through 5. Joe and I have a lot on our list that are the same, so we'll talk about that. But, Joe, we got to start off tonight's show with arguably the best coach in college football right now, Kirby Smart, coming out today and coming out with some massive statements. Kirby was basically asked a question about the upcoming April 7th litigation that can be coming down with the House case. So this affects Big Ten and college football just in general, or SEC, everybody. But Kirby Smart came out and said, look, we might have a little bit of understanding of what's going to happen on April the 7th. The problem that we have right now is that I'm being reached out to by agents to go on a Zoom call so that I can start cherry picking guys that I potentially would want in the portal. Stop, pause, hold on. Wait a minute. Stop. What? Like, what did you just say?
Right.
You mean to tell me that Kirby Smart just said that agents are calling him and saying, hey, I have a list full of guys that I represent, and these guys will shop to be in the portal, and nobody's doing anything about that? That is ridiculous. And why would Kirby lie? Kirby ain't lying.
No, he's not. You and I are privy to what goes on behind closed doors. And I speak to agents, you speak to agents. I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these movements that happen when kids do decide to enter the transfer portal, it's because their agents have reached out to schools and they've already started the communication. If they don't think that it's worth their player entering the portal, they'll stay, they'll get a bump in pay or whatever they're getting, and they'll stick around. But if they put their name out there and the school that they're currently at can't match it, that player enters the portal and then they go to the highest bidder for the most part. That is what the current process is. I think it's crazy that it's kind of lazy that these agents are just throwing together a Zoom call saying like, all right, just tell me which dudes you want and we're going to make it happen. That to me is really stupid, but it is insane to like really put into context here of how unregulated this is. That wouldn't happen in the professional leagues. That would none of that would happen in any professional league.
I'm not going to go that far. I do think that Scott Boras would tell any team, for what it's worth, like, hey, my guy's not going to re-up with like his organization.
But they're not doing a Zoom call going like, okay, guys, here's my list.
Correct.
Just point at them and tell me which ones you want.
I mean, he would probably tell GMs like, hey, he doesn't want to go back there. He really wants to go here.
Right.
And I'm sure he would tell teams like, hey, like, I'll give an example. Like the Juan Soto deal in New York this past year. He's like, I want to stay in New York. Well, he stays with the Mets. He stays in New York, but it's just a different team. I bring that up to say this. How in the good – see, here's the part. So Kirby Smart laid out a couple of things here. Number one, he brought up the simple nature of, listen, guys, here's the truth. We're going to pay TV revenue share to players this year. We know that we're going to do that. Now, number one, we have absolutely no idea what it's going to look like. Now, we might talk about this at the end if we have time, but Dan Wenzel, now of ESPN, which is so weird to say, Dan Wenzel of ESPN, but Dan Wenzel brought it up today in an article, which was a great read, by the way, of basically in part saying that, like, hey, man, we want regulation, and these big conferences, Big Ten, SEC want regulation. Joe, what, like, I got to stop and just ask the general question. The SEC and the Big Ten both have regulation over tampering. 100%. You cannot talk to an agent about another player at another school to make him to come to your school. That is against the rules. We talk about we need regulation all the time. I have been screaming from the rafters on this show and on Twitter and everywhere. Why in the world wouldn't the SEC and the Big Ten go after these guys or these agents and say, listen, you better stop or we're going to give you a cease and desist. We're going to tell players not to be represented by you. If the NCAA doesn't want to do anything about tampering, and Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are all like, hey, we want regulation. Joe, I got to call it like I see it. I call bullshit that they want regulation. There's literally laws in place in the SEC where tampering is illegal. The same with the Big Ten. It is legally not right by the bylaws of the conference for you to tamper. If you want to be a part of that conference as a player or a team that's in the conference or in the Big Ten or the SEC, they can come down with legislation. They can say, no, you are going to sit out. We're not going to allow you to do that. And hey, guess what?
But they don't do it though. That's where I'm kind of confused by this conversation that you're having.
That's why I literally just said, that's why I call bullshit when they come out here and say they want legislation. No, they don't. No, they do not. Because they could easily, Joe, could you imagine? They already have this somewhat in place. Like, as an example, the Big Ten and the SEC, if a player went in the spring portal, let's say I go to Ohio State and I wanted to go to Penn State because Jim Knowles went there. Like, hey, man, I tried to stick it out here at Ohio State. I didn't want to do it, but I want to go to Penn State now. The Big Ten would make me sit out a year if I transfer to Penn State. I can't now in the spring portal. I cannot go inside conferences. So why is that upheld? And then now you have a situation where the SEC does the same thing. Why aren't they going after this? This is what I'm saying. They could go after this. I feel like they're deciding not to.
They can't go after it because if one school calls out another school, then somebody else is going to call out that. Like, everybody's doing it. So there's nobody that's going to fall on the sword to become the example. Everybody's afraid to tattle on one another because nobody is without sin in this situation. Everybody is making these mistakes. I think, though, part of this conversation that's being missed, a lot of the tampering occurs is initiated by agents. And that was what was brought up by Kirby.
But that's
a lot of these
legal.
I know that it is, but it's not. I think that what a lot of people just immediately assume when you hear tampering is that a coach sends a DM to a player and says, let's talk. You need to enter the portal. We want you to come play for us. It's not that simple. It is a communication between an agent and institutions to determine and to see if they can get an opportunity for their player to transfer somewhere else before they go in the portal, or they just jump in the portal and then see and wait for any offers that come. So I think that is where the regulation needs to happen. It needs to be more regulation on what the agents are doing. And I thought that what Dan's article highlighted, and I thought that was really interesting that he talked about or got the perspective of others about in that article, was basically a lot of the problems that we have at the current moment are impossible to regulate. Now that you have made it okay for interactions between boosters and players when it wasn't supposed to occur in the past, you now create opportunities for tampering and also for money to being handed out.
Okay, well, if that is the case, and listen, I'm not conceding that the point that I just made, but let's just say that you're right, and nobody wants to fall on the sword, then I don't want to hear anybody else in college football, whether it be commissioner, whether it be a Hall of Fame worthy head coach, whether it be an active head coach, about we need regulation then. I don't want to hear it anymore. Like, I know that you say that you want it, but I do feel as if today was Kirby putting his foot down and saying enough is enough. Like that's how it comes off to me. And Joe, I got to be real with you. I don't agree if the Big Ten and the SEC came together and said, listen, listen, everything that you did in the past is fugazi. It's done. It's over with. You keep doing this shit, we're coming down on you. We're coming down on you. Because until real leadership happens, nothing will take hold. Leadership is doing something that nobody else wants to do when you know it's right and nobody else wants to do it. That is true leadership.
We're not going to get that. We're not going to get that true leadership.
Okay, well then
there's too many politics and manipulation.
Okay, so then don't tell me that you want it then. Stop going to the camera and telling me that you want this when it's all bullshit. Because it is all bullshit. Joe, do you really believe, and I'm just going to be dead ass honest, do you believe Tony Petitti, when Ohio State went out and got Caleb Downs, who will be number one on our list on top Big Ten players defensively, do you really think Tony Petitti would go after Ohio State because they went and got Caleb Downs?
No, absolutely not.
Listen now. Kirby literally sent out a link to his own collective when Caleb Downs went to Ohio State. So he's not at fault. I mean, it's not like he's clean here either. I mean, let's just be open and honest. There was something that he said there, and he called out players. He goes, bro, I ain't never had an All-American player that money was all that they talked about, and they were worth a shit.
That was a really interesting point he brought up, by the way.
He was fed up today, bro. He was in his full Nick Saban rant. He went full mentor on our ass.
I think he was right for a lot of the framing of the situation that he put out there, and it was kind of funny that he went into his full Nick Saban mode, where Saban used to grandstand about the future of the sport and the direction of the sport and where things are turning and going towards. I think that there is, from what I read from Dan's article and what Kirby said today, they're just pointing out more issues and new issues that are not fixable. And I think that you bring up a point that they don't want to enforce the tampering that is there, because
no, they don't.
The ones that are doing it, it's every team, but more importantly, like, you're not going to take a shot at Ohio State when they're representing the conference winning national championships. You're not going to take a shot at Georgia or at Alabama because they're competing for the top of the conference.
And you know what else
you're in a battle. The problem is right now, Blake, is that you're in a battle with the other conferences.
Exactly.
So whatever helps your conference win and be the best, that is what the conferences are going to do. They're not going to allow it to happen.
As the great song once said, B-I-N-G-O, and bingo was his name-o. You're damn right. And you know why? You know what, too? You don't have auto bids with these 4 teams from the Big Ten and the SEC. So you know what? If I'm Greg Sankey and I'm saying, hey, LSU kind of went out there this year. Ole Miss kind of went out there this year and dominated the portal. I don't think I'm going to hit them. I don't think I'm going to regulate this shit, because what if I can get one of those teams into the playoff and get my conference more money? I'm not going to do it. Why would they do it? Why in the Sam hell would they do that? They're not going to do that. They're not going to do it. They won't do it because of money. That's what it all comes down to. They would never. Greg Sankey would never. Joe, listen, I am going to clip this shit and I am going to mark it down and I'm putting it up in my office. And on July the 15th or whatever the day is for SEC Media Days, Greg Sankey is going to go out to that podium and he's going to say, we need legislation for NIL in the transfer portal. And I'm going to come out back to this show today and say, Kirby Smart came out and said, agents are out here tampering for schools on a day in, day out basis, and you have the legal authority from your own conference to make something happen about it, and you won't do it.
Well, the only way that this is going to happen at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I completely reject this point of, and I understand why you're bringing it up, but I don't think that we're ever going to have Petiti or Sankey take action against one of the teams in his own conference. The only way that we get an actual movement forward is if a team in a weaker conference, a Big 12 team, an ACC team, whatever it is, that loses a player and reports him to the NCAA, and the NCAA is actually able to uphold and go through with the punishment for it. That is the only way that we take progress towards that. But the problem is right now is that the NCAA gets sued for everything that they do.
Well, let me ask you this question. With Kirby Smart's questions today, why can't the NCAA do something about it then?
Because they're afraid that they're going to get sued. They're in a holding pattern right now until things start to change. Now, if you want to tamper, now's the time to do it. That's why everybody's doing it.
I know it. You're right. You're basically what you're saying is, Blake, the reality is it won't happen. But my stance will be, you're right. The reality of it is it will not change and it will not happen. However, and with a massive all capitalized, however, it doesn't mean that I got to continue for the 5th straight year. Here you go to a podium and talk shit about how we need legislation. Well, you won't do shit about it either. You've had 5 years to do. Joe, they've had half a decade. Half a decade. We've gone. Joe, think about this. My son, you know how old my son is. Think about this. When NIL was passed, my son just got born. Think about that for a moment. And
wait. But I would argue though that 5 years really actually isn't enough time for this to get developed. It's such a foreign concept that none of us know how to navigate it.
Well, they haven't. Name one thing that they've tried to do. Have they even come? Let me ask you this. Last question. I swear to God, we got to move on.
Okay.
Is there one thing that they've even tried to do? Name one thing that they've tried to do, even an attempt.
The trying to put penalties on Tennessee for the flight with Nico, and then the courts got involved, and then that was the end of everything. That's the only example I can really think of, and that is also an example.
That's not really tampering, but I get what you're saying.
Well, it's illegal recruiting, and then immediately the school went to court.
The shit out of the NCAA and won. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Joe, we continue on our path here of breaking down our top 5 players at each position, but offense, defense, quarterbacks we did, running backs, wide receivers, all that. Tonight, we go to the Big Ten. We talk about our top 5 defenders. On your list, Who do you have as your top 5 defenders in the Big Ten?
Number 1, I've got Caleb Downs, the Ohio State safety. Number 2, Dani Sutton from Penn State, the defensive end. Dillon Thieneman at number 3, Oregon defensive back. Matayo Uiagalelei, the Oregon edge rusher at number 4. And then number 5, Gabe Jacas, the Illinois defensive lineman.
Here are my top 5. Number 1, we're both the same. I have Caleb Downs at number 1, the safety out of Ohio State. Matayo Uiagalelei at number 2, the defensive end for the University of Oregon. Number 3, I have Dillon Thieneman, the safety out of Oregon as well. So 2 back-to-back Oregon Ducks on the list there. Dani Sutton, number 4 for me, the Penn State edge. And then 1, I just like the kid at number 5. I know that you'll probably push back on this, but Zakee Wheatley, the very explosive safety out of Penn State. Joe, let's start off with number 1 here with Caleb Downs. By far, arguably, that Ohio State has the number 1 offensive player in the Big Ten, but also the number 1 defender in the entire Big Ten with Caleb Downs. The transfer out of Alabama had a massive year this year. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's a no-brainer that Caleb Downs is the best defensive player returning in the Big Ten. He was already, as a true freshman, one of the best defensive backs in the country. If he was in this draft class in 2025 as a sophomore, he probably would be a first-round pick. He checks all the boxes that you look for in a premier.
No, there's probably, no probably.
Wait, hold on. Well, safeties typically don't go in the first round. I mean, look at Malachi Starks and how the fact that he has slid despite being one of the best prospects in the class. Caleb Downs, though, has freaking amazing instincts. He is a great tackler. He is aggressive. He's fantastic when the ball is in the air, and he's a great overall athlete. He will be a first-round pick in the 2026 draft. I have no doubts about that, being the best safety returning in college football.
81 tackles, 6 PBUs, and 2 interceptions a year ago. He did have the punt return for a touchdown. I think it was against Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, that he took one to the house. Just an overall special athlete. You know, he was on my number 1 on my list a year ago, if you remember, his top 5 DBs when we did it. I thought he had a great year. His tackles were down 20, but he played 3 extra games. I think that's got a lot to do with he was just surrounded by elite talent all over the place. And he didn't, for once, he just didn't have to do everything. And I feel like, though, in the sense of that he didn't have to do everything, made him more special. So statistically, he was down, but because he didn't have to do everything, he could be more efficient in everything that he did. Joe, in baseball, we talk about guys being a 5-tool player. I feel like when I talk about Caleb Downs, he's that 5-tool DB, or especially a 5-tool safety. Can run, great in coverage, got the interceptions and PBUs. He's a good tackler in space. And, oh, by the way, he'll come down and thump you. Okay, if he needs to be a very big key of the run game, he'll come down and hit you. But then another thing, man, he's just one of those special athletes. Run, jump, explosive. I don't think that there's anything that he doesn't do at a well above average rate. That's the thing for me that I think sets him apart, is he might not be the best overall defender, meaning in the air, like pass defender, but the guy that's a better pass coverage guy, Caleb Downs is head and shoulders a better tackler than him and will come down and run support. That's what starts separating these kind of guys. You know, him and Zakee Wheatley from Penn State that we'll talk about later on in the show. I don't see safeties that come down the box and will tackle you like the both of them do.
Yeah.
Dillon Thieneman will do it, and we'll talk about him as well. You know, coverage can be hit or miss sometimes, but regardless, these old school safeties are the ones that are making plays all over the place.
Yeah, and I think that the way that you framed him is perfect, is that he is super well-rounded. He does a lot of the little things correctly. I think now the question is, but by the way, anyone who questioned, there were a lot of people during the year that were like, oh, his production's down. That means he's not that good, which was so unbelievably stupid and lazy. It was so dumb that people were trying to make that argument. the real ball knowers knew that he was just surrounded by so many guys that it's hard to have that same type of tackle production on an insanely deep defense. But now I do wonder this upcoming year, how does he perform going back to being the number one guy? And this upcoming year, it's still a well-recruited group. I'm not saying that Ohio State's defense isn't great, but he's now the veteran leader, and he is going to be the guy that is going to be the focal point of their defensive success. We already know how he performed when he was at Alabama, when he was their best defensive player. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens this upcoming season for Ohio State.
I got to be real with you. There is a worry for me with Caleb Downs.
What is that?
3 different coordinators in 3 different years. Elite players don't get affected by stuff like that. But at the same time, you're right. He's going to have to be the vocal point. It's not as if that Matt Patricia doesn't know how to utilize really good safeties, right? Like, I mean, he'll probably do a lot of unique things with him. I do believe that there's something to be said like, hey, how do they utilize him again? This is a brand new defense of how you want to run things. How is he going to be utilized, I think, is a big thing. And look, they didn't ask him. They asked him to be inside the defense. They didn't ask him to be the vocal point of the defense, and he still made plays. There's always something about you having 3 coordinators in 3 years, but he was all over the place. I mean, the top safety in PBUs a year ago. So, look, overall, the number 1 defender in the Big Ten for the both of us. All right, number 2, Joe, you have the Dani Dennis Sutton, the edge at Penn State. I have him at 4, but let's go ahead and talk about Dani Dennis Sutton, the edge from Penn State.
Yeah, I put him there because I think that Dennis Sutton is going to be a significant riser this year. He was very productive this last season, 8.5 sacks, 13 tackles for loss as the secondary rusher on Penn State's defense. But I think that what is really intriguing about him is just seeing all the tools that he has. He is so explosive out of the gate. He has a tremendous first step. He's super long. He's super bendy, but he's still been putting it all together. He's still been improving year by year. I'm really glad that he came back to school because he would have gotten lost in the mix of a really deep edge class in 2025. Instead, he gets to be probably the premier player in the 2026 NFL draft. I think that like we're doing right now, for anyone who's been tracking the 2025 draft, what we're doing right now with Shamar Stewart, where everybody's going to watch the film and they didn't have a ton of great production from him, but everybody's drooling over the traits and he's going to, he tested really well at the combine. That has driven his stock up to the point where he is going to be a top 10 pick. I think that the Dani Dennis Sutton is going to have that same type of an ascension, and it's going to start this year with even more production than the 8.5 sacks that he had this past season.
You know why he didn't have double-digit sacks this year?
Abdul Carter.
Because he had potentially and arguably the best overall player in this year's draft that was on the opposite side of him. Joe, he won a lot of battles. I mean, look, I don't think he's the number 1 player in the country, right? Like you could have made the argument that Abdul Carter was okay last year. Like you could easily make that, that battle. But he got a lot of one-on-one battles, and he won a lot of them. The reason he didn't get to a lot of those sacks is because the guy in front of him or on the opposite side beat him there. Now he is the vocal point. The reason I had him at 4 was because, listen, I know that the production is there. I'm interested to see what he does without Abdul Carter, right? Like because he's going to be the vocal point, I still think he has a massive year. I still think he's going to be fantastic. You said one thing about him that was really interesting to me. You called him, what was it, bendy?
Very flexible, very bendy. That's what we look for.
You know what's interesting about him? I feel like he's very bendy in the running game. Not so much. I mean, in the past game, yes. I've never seen a guy use pass rush moves to get off blocks in the running game. It's really interesting to watch him against the run. Now, here's the thing, too. Both of them, for what it's worth, Abdul Carter and him, was probably the best edge duo in the country last year. And I felt like Dennis Sutton, it got lost in the sauce when Abdul Carter would move around. that a lot of teams would try to run right at Dennis Sutton in the production that he did have there. I think there's something to be said about teams like, hey, are we going to run to Abdul Carter's side or are we going to run to him? And he locked it down. He did a really good job of maintaining when everything was being focused at his direction. So now that he doesn't have the focus in the running game, he will in the pass game or pass pro. It's going to be interesting to see how people defend him moving forward, though.
Right. The bigger part of this really applies. This question I just asked with Caleb Downs. This 1,000% applies with a defensive lineman. When you no longer have your running mate and you have a guy who's going to be a top 3 pick rushing opposite of you, how do you step up to the plate? The big question for him this year was that he was rotational the prior years, and now he was getting to start and be a main contributing defensive end on this roster. He started most of the games. He was out there for 1 million snaps, and his production went up significantly. So he already checked that box. The box that now needs to be checked is, okay, now that Abdul Carter is gone and you're going to face double teams if you start to play really well, how do you take advantage of that? Not take advantage of that. How do you step up to the plate in that situation? He needs to be prepared for the added pressure on his shoulders. And if he is able to battle through that adversity, he is going to justify his placement here and also justify the hype for him as a draft prospect and as one of the best defensive linemen in the country.
He very well could be. I will say this. There's one thing about being a running, like you mentioned, a running mate for somebody that is potentially the number one. He's not going to be the number 1 overall pick, but should be.
No.
The reason I had him at 4 was because Matayo Uiagalelei, every time I looked up for Oregon, he did get the sack for them, right?
Right.
It's not a shot at Dennis Sutton. He is a fantastic player. But now that the spotlight is on you, as we've been mentioning here, how do you perform? That would be the big question. All right, speaking of Oregon and speaking of Oregon players, Joe, I do have Matayo Uiagalelei at number 2 for me. And along his new running mate, the DB, the safety, Dillon Thieneman out of Oregon at 3. You have, you have Theinemen at 3 and Matayo at 4. Let's go with Theinemen first. The new safety out of Purdue that is now at Oregon, that arguably the number 1 defender that was coming out of the portal this year, goes to Oregon. Your thoughts?
I'm a really big Dillon Thieneman fan for anybody who's listened to me before talk about him. Last year I brought him up as a breakout player, and he was already really productive as a true freshman, and now he ends up being the most highly sought after safety that entered the transfer portal. He had 105 tackles. He had 6 interceptions in 2023. He didn't have any this year because I think teams were a lot smarter about taking chances.
They sucked.
Yeah.
And he was not the beneficiary of that. They sucked.
He is a total throwback to an old school safety. He is not super rangy. He is not a guy that is going to cover the entire sideline to sideline, back end in the field. Right. John Lynch is a good comparison for him. I think that he was forced into a role because he was their best defender and they desperately needed him to be able to cover the full field, and he still succeeded at it. So now I know that this big, massive safety who's built like a linebacker and will smack the shit out of you, now we can move him into the box because there are more opportunities for the guys around him to set him up to succeed, and he doesn't have to play over the top because they're going to be better recruited at free safety. So Dillon Thieneman as a strong safety this upcoming year, I think that his production and his performance is only going to go up now that he is actually surrounded by what is a real talented defense and not just a slappy Purdue defense.
Dude, what's up with these white dudes playing DB these days?
Who are you talking about? Cooper DeJean? Is that who else you're thinking?
Well, they got 2 white DBs in Philly. I'm just saying, I mean, he feels like an Eagle to me.
If he's on the Eagles, that would be ridiculous.
It would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let me throw this your way. I think that his production, all right. When I mean production, I don't mean overall statistics. When I mean production, I mean massive plays. There were not a lot of massive plays that you could have at Purdue. Look, you had 104 tackles. That's absolutely atrocious when a safety has to have triple digit tackles. Okay. I mean, let's not, come on, bro. Like, that can't happen. It means you're getting beat in a lot of situations. Their corner duo is going to be insane. And by the way, one of those 4 freshmen, Joe, they got what, 4 of the top 5 DBs in this class did Oregon. One of those freshman DBs is going to hit. Let's just be real. One of them will hit. Their secondary is pretty nasty, and it's going to be led by him.
Yeah.
You're 100% correct on one thing. Joe, I'd put him in the box as a third linebacker and let him roam. I would Troy Polamalu his ass. I would
absolutely.
I would say, listen, dude, your instincts are insane, and there are going to be some situations that we don't want you. We need you to do what we want you to do. This kid's instincts is, and in the Big Ten, when he had nobody around him worth a damn, I think was elite. Now, I don't think great, good, and look, I will fight over verbiage all the time. He was elite when it came to run defense. He is an elite run defender. I will be interested to see this. He is now at a place that expects more. Joe, when you get in these situations, when you play a team like Oregon, teams are going to need to throw the ball on you in these massive situations. You started this off by saying that he's not necessarily rangy. That will come back to bite him. Because when I think of going up against Ohio State again, when I think about some of these big games that you have to play in the playoffs, I know that he had a lot of interceptions. There were a lot of situations that I did think last year that I'm like, bro, why is he getting beat by a tight end?
I think you're kind of misunderstanding what I mean by rangy. He was asked to play free safety. He was asked to cover the full field. So when I'm talking about rangy is him being able to play that position of free safety. He's not a free safety. He is a big-bodied, old-school, physical, strong safety. That is where he succeeds.
Per ESPN, though, he gave up 46 catches. That's a lot. That is a lot. Now,
well, but he wasn't set up. But he was. But if you watch his tape, the matchups that he was placed in were not matchups that were conducive to him succeeding.
Well,
they just weren't.
And Purdue couldn't score if they were placed the ball at the 1 yard line. They were ass. I mean, ass. I don't even want to go there. I'm not even going to. They were horrible. They were god awful. So maybe because he was on the field so much, that stat is massively elevated. But I mean, 46 is a lot. I mean, why is the drop off of going from that many interceptions to 0? It's not as if, and then you put him at free.
Well, he played free safety at both years. He was playing. He did a lot. He played all over their defense, but he was playing a lot of free safety both years. He was playing single high center field in Purdue's defense because they needed him to, and he had the instincts to kind of make up for him not having that crazy athleticism.
A lot of tackles for free safety. That's a shitload of tackles.
Well, because he's really instinctual and he's really good against the run, and he's also great at tracking, lanes to very efficiently bring down ball carriers. He will never miss an angle. He's that type of a guy. I'm not worried about him in coverage because he was not set up in coverage situations that he's going to see this year at Oregon, nor the ones that he's going to see in the NFL. I'm very confident in this kid that he's going to step up to the plate because at Oregon, he is going to be surrounded by actual defensive backs that can play, that are at the top of the conference, instead of just a group of Purdue players that only would start at Purdue.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're right. I mean, he's a strong safety. Why they made him play free is very criminal. They should be locked up and put in federal prison. Let's just call it what it is.
Sure.
I mean, don't you think that they should be put in federal prison?
I don't know if I go that far, but that was a
Guantanamo Bay.
Move.
Guantanamo Bay. All right.
Okay.
Joe, another Oregon player that we have here at number 4, you have Matayo Uiagalelei, and I have him at 3. Or I have him at 2. Joe, I was really high. I'm really high on him, but your thoughts, you had him at 4. Your thoughts on Matayo?
Matayo Uiagalelei is definitely a riser over the past season. 11.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks. I really like him for this upcoming season, and I think that he is going to continue to be one of the best defensive linemen in the conference. The only reason why I have a little bit of pause on him is I think that there's generally not a lot of consistency on. No. There's just not a lot of consistency on film against the run. I saw a lot of times on film when I was doing a quick breeze through of his tape, a lot of times of him getting driven off the ball, a lot of times of him getting pushed out of rushing lanes. I just want to see a little bit more well-roundedness. I think that he's got everything that you look for in a capable pass rusher, and he has the physicality to continue to build on that production. He is going to be great for them this upcoming year. I want to wait before I jump all the way in by saying that he is the conference's best defensive lineman.
Dude, he just came up with so many big plays, though.
It's fair. And he had best performances in the biggest games. In the
biggest of games. Look, I'm pulling this up now just so that we can look at this. Matayo Uiagalelei, 2 tackles for loss against Ohio State in the first matchup with a sack. He had 5 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. The sack came at the end against Will Howard to pretty much seal the deal. So when I look at that, the biggest play in the game, if we're just going to be honest, arguably second or third biggest play of their entire season last year, and he's the one making a play. Let's go down. Do you remember that Wisconsin game when they won by 3?
I do. I remember the big play that he had there. Yeah.
He had the big sack there at the end. Here's the truth. You are spot on that there were moments that he got driven off on the ball in the running game. But here's the fact of that too. Everybody on that defensive line got blown away. Joe, they were horrible defending the run at the end of the season. Let's call it what it is. Oregon was very bad defending the run. Now let's go, to Penn State. When Penn State is coming all the way back in that Big Ten title game, who sacked Drew Allar to pretty much seal the deal?
Matayo Uiagalelei.
What do I take? You're all right. If we want to have the argument or discussion that he's not the best overall defensive lineman in the Big Ten, this is what I'm going to do. I'll concede that point. I'll give it to Dennis Sutton. But, man, I got 3 games last year in an undefeated season that he was the reason that he was the player that made the play at the end against really talented teams to win football games. And I can't overlook that. Now, you can go to the second Oregon game or second Ohio State game versus Oregon, and that is completely fine. Everybody in that game got their asses whooped. It was not just him. But even in that, what did he do? His 1 tackle was a tackle for loss. But, Joe, they were getting their asses beat the entire time. That whole defense got their ass whooped. It wasn't just him. I just could not, in this list, overlook the amount of massive plays that he made. And you know why it's elevated for me? Because everybody poo-pooed on his brother for so long that maybe he just got the entire Uiagalelei clutch gene. He got all of it. He took all of his brothers, and there's something to be said with the game on the line 3 times in a season that you're the dude making the play. Everybody at Oregon thought that was going to be Jordan Burch. Jordan Burch ain't sniffed that. It was Matayo that made the play. Jordan Burch wasn't making that play, dog. I'm sorry, he didn't do it. There wasn't one time they were like, there goes Jordan Burch. 3 games?
Okay. By the way, I would say that to the Uiagalelei comment that you made,
he got all the clutch gene.
I think many would argue that DJ Uiagalelei was playing the wrong position. I think that if he,
you think
I'm sure people are going to.
He was an edge.
I've said this before. Like if he grew up playing tight end or something like that, I think he could have had a better because he's a good athlete. Just didn't have that innate instinct at quarterback. my buddy is one of the front office guys for the Dodgers. I've told you this.
You know they
right, you
drafted.
told me about the baseball stuff. Yeah,
yeah, they drafted the brother.
Is he gonna play baseball? By the way, I haven't heard anything about him this draft class.
Dude, they're trying to persuade him, but that's neither here nor there. But continue on Matayo.
All I had else to say there, though, about Matayo, I understand where you're coming from, that he had a lot of great production this past year in big games. And I think that he definitely stepped up to the plate. But we, more than anybody, this is more than denied into Sutton. This is more than any defensive lineman in the country. He was playing on a defense with Jordan Birch, who's going to get drafted in the first 3 rounds, Derek Harmon, who's going to go in the first round, Jamari Caldwell, who's going to go in the first 5 rounds, 6 rounds of this upcoming draft. That whole defensive line is gone. It's him. It's all Matayo. Matayo is we're gonna. Well, they did bring in Barry Alexander, but we know Barry Alexander is a little bit unreliable in terms of quite literally just showing up to be at the facility. I just would like to see, for him specifically, as I said to lead into this segment, is I need to see a little bit more consistency from him. And now there's going to be a lot more pressure on him for expectations of him being a former 5-star and him being the leading defensive lineman. I have high hopes for him, though. I've spoken very highly about him.
Can I ask a question? All right, I'm just going to ask.
Okay.
What shows consistency than having 3 games where he made the play to end it?
I'm talking about the consistency I brought up in the run game. I'm talking about seeing him getting driven off the spot. Like, I watched the Michigan tape, and there were a couple plays where he got completely, scooped out and driven out of a rushing lane.
I mean, that I can't deny that. I mean, that's fair. But again, like, dude, that's you don't teach that. That's not a teachable trait. Either guys have that or they don't have it. And he took all of DJ's clutchness.
Exactly.
You know how in the Marvel comic books, like, guys get their power stolen? Matayo did that to DJ, but he pulled out the clutch gene. When he plays MLB The Show, he puts all of his skill points on clutch.
I don't know how useful that is, but
clutch is.
No, I agree with you though. That he's shown up in the big moments, and that's what makes him special.
Very much. Joe, at number 5, you have Gabe Jacas. Am I saying that correctly?
I think it's Jacas.
Jacas. You have Gabe Jacas, the Illinois defensive end. Let's go with him first before we get to Wheatley.
Yeah, Jacas is like your prototypical guy that ends up getting drafted somewhere in the 3rd round and then sticking around for a very long time. Big, physical, strong kid. Had pretty good production this past year. 13 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. When we talk about Illinois for this upcoming season, which we're going to start doing those individual team profiles very soon, he has to be brought up first when we're talking about their premier players. The defense is the backbone of their success, and he is the backbone of their defense. He is super strong at the point of attack. He has the physical profile, as I've said, to be a quality player in the Big Ten this upcoming season. I think that he is a tone setter for him. Not somebody that I necessarily would pound the table for, that I think that there's probably likely guys that are going to rise above him. But knowing what Illinois' expectations are for the season and the success that they had last year, I feel pretty good about placing him at the end of my list.
One thing that I would say about him is we just got done talking about Michigan. Michigan was his biggest game last year. He had 2.5 sacks in that game, 13 total tackles. Joe, get this. Dude had, 6 tackles for loss and 13 tackles? That's insane. Okay. I got to be real with you. I don't do this often. I don't know enough about him to
which is understandable. I don't think many people I didn't know enough about him until I pulled up his tape and like really watched him today, because you don't get a lot of Illinois games on TV. You just don't.
Well, and that's my fault. And look, I don't get to see your list before the show starts. I mean, I would need to get more eyeballs on him. Something that does stand out statistically from him: 3 forced fumbles for a defensive edge. That's a lot. I mean, people would say, well, like 3 is not a massive number for an edge player. Bro, you see that from linebackers and safeties. You don't see or corners. You don't see that from defensive linemen. it would appear that he's really good in the run game, considering the amount of tackles that he had and the tackles for loss. If he did have 13, 6 of them came in one game. That means 7 in the other.
As much.
Yeah, I mean, but it's against Michigan, and they run the football a shitload. So, I mean, it's neither here nor there. I would need to get more eyes on him. So that's what I'd say there.
Your guy Zakee Wheatley though. What do you got?
Yeah, number 5. I have Zakee Wheatley, the safety, not edge.
I definitely.
Yeah, the safety out of Penn State. He might be my favorite player in the Big Ten. He is by far he is my favorite player in the Big Ten. Brother, when that man, this is what made me really start watching him. Because Penn State had a lot of big games this year. Okay? Ohio State, Oregon. He was all over the field in those, but that's fine. Brother, when this man came down in the box and told Ashton Jeanty not today, big dog, multiple times, and was like laying the lumber on Ashton Jeanty, I was like, God damn. Did the same thing against Notre Dame, too. That Notre Dame film is insane how he would fly to the football. Bro, I don't give two Rudy Poos what anybody on planet Earth tells me. This dude is a dog. He will headhunt for you all over the place. The thing that I would say, he did produce more, I thought, in the playoffs from a pass coverage standpoint. I thought he got better there. Of the 4 PBUs that he had this season, 3 of them came in the playoffs. He did have an interception in the playoffs. So he played better in coverage as the season went on here. Okay? My only thing with him, bro, 95 tackles as a safety, and he will knock your block off. Dog, all right. Look, I don't know what this kid's draft status is going to be. I don't care. If every one of my players defensively play with the mentality of this kid, we win an Natty. That's what I know.
I think that the biggest thing for me with Wheatley is what you just mentioned there, is that his impact in big games, for the amount of big games that Penn State had, was phenomenal. And I think that the Notre Dame game was a really good example of that, because he was all over the place. He had so many tackles in that game. He was noticeable. Like you know how you notice a player a lot when you're watching a broadcast and you hear his name over and over again? I was at the game. Don't have the broadcast to constantly keep telling me Zakee Wheatley was on that play. I knew everybody who was sitting at home watching the game was talking about him, and you kept hearing his name. But he was noticeable in person too. He was very impactful for that Penn State defense. Penn State's defense, despite losing Abdul Carter, I don't think a lot of people realize that they're really not going to take that much of a step backward. I really don't think that they're going to take any step backward.
Dude,
they're bringing in Jim Knowles, which is a huge add for them, but you're still balanced across the board. That's where the dangerousness comes into play for this whole unit with Zakee Wheatley in the mix.
Dude, I listen now. Well, look, we have not really got into the nitty-gritty of football. Like, we have not made our top 25. We have not talked about our top 10 teams. We hadn't done any of that. With everything that Penn State's got coming back, if James Franklin does not find a way, look, I'm not saying win a national title. I'll even go as far as to say it's so hard to win a national title. He better get to the Final Four again.
He's at least no. He's got to get to the national title.
No, I'm gonna give him the Final Four, because look, man, anything can happen, right? Like look, one of these young buck quarterbacks step up. Like, bro, we're talking about. Think about this. You have Dante Moore and Julian Sayin in your own conference. Joe, one of those two are going to go off. They're going to. I mean, they're just going to go off. Then you have Arch Manning in the SEC, and then everything coming out of Georgia is about Ryan Puglisi. What if both of them hit? I mean, there's a strong possibility that they're going to have to face 2 of those teams. And if they just beat 2 of them and they get to a Final Four, look. All right. But, dog, you better get there. You better get there. You got too much returning. Joe, they think about this. Them and Oregon are the only teams that we've had 2 players on these lists. They keep showing up. Every list, I feel like a Penn State player, when we do the Big Ten, is showing up here. You better perform, bro. You better.
Absolutely.
This is put up or shut up time. Now, you could make the argument in the past that they maybe just weren't as talented as everybody else. Right? Like, I mean, look, they were very serviceable. They were really talented, but they were never like, they never had that extra talent like Ohio State did or Michigan did or Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Notre Dame, whatever. What's your excuse now? What's your excuse now? This Wheatley kid is a flat-out baller shot caller with 20-inch blades on his Impala. Chevy, shout out. I mean, but this kid can play. Look, man, I feel like we're going to be talking a lot about Penn State this year. That's just
it's a given. It's a given, and guys like Sutton, Dennis Sutton, and Wheatley are a big reason why we're going to spend a lot of time talking about him this offseason.
I don't think the Trojans need to be talking about Dante Moore when you – I mean –
Who the hell's y'all's quarterback? Are we really doing this right now? You guys feel that confident about Jordan Maeva after one game where he threw multiple interceptions? Like what?
Trojan fans might want to be calm down, bro.
Yeah, honestly.
All right. We'll see y'all again on Sunday. Y'all have a good weekend. Peace.